You'll never be more than the help. The words hit Malik Hartwell like a physical blow, echoing through the marble-floored foyer of the Weston mansion as 20 guests in designer gowns and tailored suits erupted in cruel laughter. Damien Weston's voice carried that particular brand of entitled venom that only came from 17 years of never hearing the word no. Malik's hands tightened around the silver tray he'd been carrying for his mother, the crystal glasses rattling against each other like his own trembling nerves. 3 days. It had been 3 days since he'd accidentally unlocked that hidden drive in Harrison Weston's study. 3 days since his entire world had shattered and reformed into something unrecognizable. 3 days of carrying a secret that burned through his chest like acid. The flash drive still felt heavy in his pocket, even though it weighed nothing. Even though it contained everything. Look at him, Damien continued, his voice dripping with the kind of casual cruelty that came as naturally as breathing to someone who'd never worked a day in his life. Standing there like he actually belongs here. Like his people. Victoria Weston's perfectly sculpted laugh joined the chorus. Damien, darling, don't be so harsh. The boy can't help what he is. What he is. As if Malik were some exotic animal, something less than human. As if the blood running through his veins wasn't the same red that flowed through theirs. As if his father hadn't been the brilliant mind behind the very technology that built their empire. Malik's breath caught in his throat. His father, Dr. James Hartwell, the man who'd died believing he was a failure, believing he'd lost everything because he wasn't smart enough, wasn't good enough. The man who'd spent his last years broken and defeated while the Westons built a billion-dollar empire on his stolen dreams. The hidden drive contained emails, contracts, audio recordings, 15 years of evidence showing exactly how Harrison Weston had systematically destroyed his father's career, stolen his revolutionary battery technology, and then had the audacity to send flowers to the funeral with a card that read, "James was a good man who deserved better." Deserved better. The hypocrisy was so thick Malik could taste it. Maybe we should give him a tip, someone suggested from the crowd, and more laughter rippled through the room. For the entertainment. Heat flooded Malik's face, but not from embarrassment. From rage. Pure, crystalline rage that threatened to spill over and burn everything in its path. His mother, Ania, appeared at his side like a guardian angel, her dark eyes flashing with protective fury even as her voice remained professionally calm. "Come, baby," she whispered, her hand gentle on his arm. "Let's go to the kitchen." But Malik couldn't move. Couldn't look away from Damien's smirking face, from the casual cruelty that these people wore like expensive jewelry. This family had destroyed his father, stolen his life's work, and built their fortune on the broken dreams of a man they'd driven to an early grave. And now they had the audacity to treat his son like he was nothing. "You have no idea who you're talking to," Malik thought, his fingers brushing against the flash drive in his pocket. "You have no idea what I know. Hey, my friend, hope you're doing well. Drop a comment and let me know how you're feeling about this story so far and where you are watching from. Some stories are too close to my heart to share on YouTube. I send those, along with little life lessons and surprises, to my email circle. If you'd like to be part of it, you can join with the link in the description." Malik. His mother's voice was more urgent now, and he could hear the fear threading through it. The same fear that had kept her awake for the past 3 nights, ever since he'd told her what he'd found. The fear that had made her beg him to delete everything, to pretend he'd never seen it, to protect the only life they'd ever known. "They'll destroy us," she'd whispered through tears. "Just like they destroyed your father. We have nothing, baby. Nothing but this job. If we lose this." She was right, of course. They had nothing. Their tiny apartment above the garage, their used car that barely ran, their entire existence balanced on the precarious edge of the Westons' goodwill. One word from Harrison Weston, and they'd be homeless, jobless, forgotten. But the flash drive changed everything. "Actually," Malik said, his voice cutting through the laughter like a blade, "I think I will be more than the help." The room fell silent so quickly it was like someone had hit a mute button. Damien's eyebrows rose in amused surprise, as if a houseplant had suddenly started speaking. "Excuse me." Malik felt his mother's fingernails dig into his arm, felt her desperate attempt to pull him away from the edge of the cliff he was about to jump off. But it was too late. The words were already forming, the decision already made. "I said I think I'll be more than the help," Malik repeated, louder this time. "In fact, I think you'll find that your family's entire fortune was built on the back of my father's work. Dr. James Hartwell. You remember him, don't you, Mr. Weston?" Harrison Weston, who had been quietly nursing a scotch in the corner, went completely still. The color drained from his face so quickly that Malik almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I don't know what you're talking about, Harrison said, but his voice cracked on the words. Don't you? Malik pulled the flash drive from his pocket, holding it up for everyone to see. Such a small thing, barely larger than his thumb. Such an insignificant-looking object to hold the power to topple an empire. Because I have emails here that say otherwise. Audio recordings. Contracts. 15 years of evidence showing exactly how you stole my father's battery technology and built Western Industries on his genius. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria's crystal wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor, the sound like a gunshot in the frozen room. Security. Damien shouted, his voice high and panicked. Get him out of here. But Malik was already moving, already running, his mother's terrified voice calling his name behind him. He burst through the mansion's front doors and into the cool night air, his heart hammering against his ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. He'd done it. He'd crossed the line, burned the bridge, declared war on the most powerful family in the city. And as he ran through the darkness with the flash drive clutched in his fist, Malik realized something that made his blood sing with terrifying joy. He wasn't afraid anymore. The Westons had no idea what was coming for them. Malik's lungs burned as he sprinted through the manicured gardens of the Weston estate, the flash drive clutched so tightly in his fist that the edges bit into his palm. Behind him, he could hear shouting, the slam of doors, the urgent bark of Harrison Weston's voice commanding his security team. But Malik knew these grounds better than any of them. 15 years of his mother working here meant 15 years of him playing in these shadows while she cleaned their toilets and polished their silver. He vaulted over the low stone wall that bordered the east garden and landed hard on the gravel path beyond, his knees screaming in protest. The pain felt good, real, grounding him in the moment when everything else felt like a surreal nightmare. 3 hours ago, he'd been just another invisible teenager helping his mother carry laundry. Now he was a fugitive carrying evidence that could destroy one of the most powerful families in the country. His phone buzzed frantically in his pocket. His mother, probably terrified out of her mind. But he couldn't answer. Not yet. Not until he figured out what came next. The parking garage beneath their apartment building was dark and empty when Malik finally made it home, his shirt soaked with sweat and his heart still hammering like a drum solo. He took the stairs 3 at a time, each step echoing his father's words from a recording he'd heard on that drive. They are going to destroy me, Ania. I can feel it. But someone needs to know the truth. The truth. His father had died believing himself a failure, never knowing that his invention, the revolutionary lithium-ion battery technology that could store renewable energy for months instead of days, had become the cornerstone of a billion-dollar empire. The Westons had stolen it, patented it under their name, and built Western Industries into a clean energy giant while James Hartwell rotted in obscurity. Malik. His mother's voice cracked like a whip the moment he walked through their apartment door. Ania Hartwell stood in their tiny living room, her uniform wrinkled and her dark eyes wild with fear. What have you done? What have you done to us? She looked so small standing there, this woman who had raised him alone after his father's death, who had worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. This woman who had sacrificed everything to make sure he could go to college, could have a future beyond cleaning other people's messes. Mama, Harrison Weston called, she interrupted, her voice shaking. He's offering us money. A lot of money. Enough to disappear, to start somewhere new. But only if you destroy whatever you found and never speak of it again. The words hit Malik like a physical blow. You talked to him. He said you'd stolen something from his study. He said you were confused, that you didn't understand what you'd found. Tears streamed down her face now, carving tracks through the exhaustion and fear. Baby, please. Let's just take the money and go. We can start over somewhere else. We can. They killed Dad. The words hung in the air between them like a loaded gun. Ania's breath caught, her hand flying to her throat. Don't say that. Your father had a heart attack. Stress from losing his job, but it was natural, it was. Listen to this. Malik pulled out his phone, scrolling to the audio file he'd copied from the drive. Harrison Weston's voice filled their cramped living room, cold and calculating. James Hartwell needs to understand that his career is over. No one will hire him after we're done. The man will be lucky if he can get a job at Radio Shack. Another voice, female, Victoria Weston. What if he fights back? What if he tries to prove the technology was his? Harrison's laugh was like broken glass. Let him try. Who's going to believe a disgraced engineer over us? Besides, men like James Hartwell, when you take away their life's work, their purpose, they tend to solve the problem themselves. The recording ended. Ania had gone completely white, her hand pressed against the wall for support. They knew, Malik whispered. They knew what destroying his career would do to him. They counted on it. His phone rang, the sound sharp and jarring in the silence. Unknown number. Malik hesitated, then answered. Malik Hartwell. The voice was female, young, professional. Who's asking? My name is Trinity Kenneby. I'm an investigative journalist with the Chronicle. I've been researching Western industries for months, and I think we need to talk. Malik's blood went cold. How did you get this number? I have sources. Look, I know what you found tonight. I know what's on that drive. And I know the Westerns are going to come after you with everything they have. Her voice was urgent, compelling. But I can help. I can make sure your story gets told, that your father gets the justice he deserves. I don't trust reporters. You shouldn't trust anyone right now. But I'm not asking for trust. I'm offering you a platform. The Chronicle has a readership of 12 million people. We can make this story go viral before the Westerns can bury it. Malik looked at his mother, saw the desperate hope flickering in her eyes. Hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of this that didn't end with them destroyed. Where do you want to meet? There's a 24-hour diner on 5th Street. Roses. I'll be there in an hour, red leather jacket, sitting in the back booth. Come alone, and bring the drive. The line went dead. Malik stared at his phone, his mind racing. This could be exactly what he needed, a way to expose the truth without bearing the full weight of the Westerns' retaliation. Or it could be a trap. Who was that? Ania asked. Someone who might be able to help. Malik grabbed his jacket from the back of a chair. I have to go. No. His mother's voice was sharp, desperate. No, baby, please. Let's just take their money. Let's just disappear. Malik stopped at the door, his hand on the handle. When he turned back, he saw his father in his mother's face, the same dark eyes, the same stubborn set to her jaw. James Hartwell had been a fighter once, before they broke him. Before they convinced him he was nothing. Dad spent 3 years trying to get someone to listen, Malik said quietly. 3 years knocking on doors, sending emails, making calls. He died thinking he was crazy, thinking he'd imagined the whole thing. But he wasn't crazy, Mama. He was right. And now I have proof. They'll destroy you just like they destroyed him. Maybe. But at least I'll go down fighting. An hour later, Malik sat across from Trinity Kenneby in the fluorescent-lit diner, the flash drive sitting on the cracked formica table between them like a tiny black bomb. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe 25, with sharp green eyes and an intensity that reminded him of a hunting cat. You're sure this is everything? She asked, sliding the drive back toward him after reviewing the contents on her laptop. 15 years worth. Emails, audio recordings, forged contracts, financial records. Everything they did to destroy my father and steal his work. Trinity leaned back in the red vinyl booth, her expression thoughtful. This is bigger than just your father, you know. If Western Industries' clean energy patents are fraudulent, if their entire empire is built on stolen technology, we're talking about billions in government contracts, international deals, stock prices. This could bring down more than just one family. Good. She smiled for the first time since he'd arrived. I like you, kid. You've got fire. Her expression grew serious again. But you need to understand what you're getting into. The Westerns have more money than God and fewer scruples than the devil. They will come after you with everything they have. Lawsuits, private investigators, character assassination. They'll dig up every mistake you've ever made and broadcast it to the world. I'm 17. How many mistakes could I have made? You'd be surprised what they can manufacture. Trinity pulled out a contract from her bag. This is a source protection agreement. Sign it, and I guarantee your identity stays secret until the story breaks. We'll publish everything simultaneously across multiple platforms, make it impossible for them to suppress. Malik reached for the pen, then stopped. Something in her expression had shifted, a flicker of something he couldn't quite identify. What happens to the evidence after you publish? Standard procedure. We keep copies for verification, return the originals to the source. And if something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you. But she said it too quickly, and her eyes didn't quite meet his. Malik's hand froze over the contract. You already know them, don't you? The Westerns. Trinity's mask slipped for just a second, and in that moment, Malik saw the truth. The calculation behind her concern, the practiced sympathy in her voice. "How much are they paying you?" he asked quietly. Her silence was answer enough. Malik grabbed the flash drive from the table and stood up, his chair scraping against the linoleum floor. "Tell Harrison Weston he's going to have to do better than a fake journalist with a conscience for hire." "Malik, wait." But he was already walking away, the drive burning in his pocket like a piece of stolen fire. Behind him, he heard Trinity make a phone call, her voice low and urgent. Outside in the parking lot, Malik realized he was completely alone. His mother was too scared to help. The one person who'd offered assistance was working for the enemy. And somewhere in the city, the most powerful family in the country was mobilizing every resource they had to destroy him. He looked up at the stars barely visible through the city's light pollution and thought about his father, who had died believing himself a failure, who had taken his secrets to the grave thinking no one would ever know the truth. Not anymore, Malik thought. I'll make sure everyone knows. But first, he had to survive long enough to tell the story. As he walked toward his car, Malik didn't notice the black sedan that had been following him since he left the apartment. Didn't see the figure in the passenger seat lifting a camera with a telephoto lens. Didn't realize that every move he'd made tonight had been carefully orchestrated. Every choice he thought was his own had been guided by invisible hands. The Westons weren't just rich. They were smart. And they'd been playing this game a lot longer than a 17-year-old boy with nothing to lose. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated just how much nothing could be worth when it was all you had left. The apartment was too quiet when Malik got home. His mother's purse sat on the kitchen counter, her keys in their usual spot by the door, but the oppressive silence that greeted him felt wrong. Ania was never this quiet. She hummed while she cooked, played old gospel music while she cleaned, filled their small space with the sound of life even when exhaustion weighed her down. "Mamau!" Malik called, his voice echoing off the thin walls. No answer. The living room was exactly as he'd left it, his mother's uniform still draped over the back of the couch where she'd thrown it in her panic. But something felt off, like walking into a house where all the furniture had been moved 2 inches to the left. Malik's phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. "Check your mother's bedroom." His blood turned to ice water. The flash drive in his pocket suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds as he forced himself to walk down the narrow hallway to his mother's room. Each step seemed to take forever, his heart hammering so hard he could feel it in his temples. The bedroom door was ajar. Inside, his mother sat in her reading chair by the window, but she wasn't alone. A young woman with honey-colored hair sat on the edge of the bed, and something about her presence made the air in the room feel electric and dangerous. "Hello, Malik," the woman said, her voice carrying a slight accent he couldn't place. "My name is Ray Parker. We need to talk." Ania's eyes were red from crying, but she was unharmed. The relief that flooded through Malik was so intense it nearly brought him to his knees. "Are you okay, Mama?" "I'm fine, baby. This young lady just wanted to have a conversation." Ray Parker looked nothing like what Malik expected from someone connected to the Westons. She was maybe 19 or 20, dressed in jeans and a leather jacket that had seen better days. Her green eyes held an intensity that reminded him of someone who'd seen too much of the world too young. "You're not a reporter," Malik said. It wasn't a question. "No, I'm Harrison Weston's daughter." The words hit like a physical blow. Malik took an involuntary step backward, his hand moving instinctively to his pocket where the drive rested. "Relax," Ray said, noting his reaction. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm here because we want the same thing." "I doubt that." "Really? You want to destroy my father's empire. I want to escape from under his thumb forever. Seems like our interests align pretty perfectly." Malik studied her face, looking for the lie, the trap, the angle he was missing. But what he saw was exhaustion, determination, and something else, a pain that looked familiar because he saw it in his own mirror every morning. "Why should I trust you?" Ray stood up and walked to the window, gazing out at the city lights below. "Because 3 months ago, I found out that my father ordered the death of a whistleblower in Ecuador. An environmental scientist who was going to expose how Western Industries was dumping toxic waste in indigenous communities." The room fell silent except for the distant hum of traffic from the street below. "The man had a family," Ray continued, her voice hollow. 2 kids, both younger than 10. "My father had him killed because it was cheaper than cleaning up the mess." She turned back to face Malik, and he could see tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. That's when I realized I wasn't just the daughter of a ruthless businessman. I was the daughter of a monster. Ania made a soft sound of sympathy, but Malik remained skeptical. And now you want to help me destroy him. I want to free us both. You from the injustice done to your family, me from being complicit in his crimes. Ray reached into her jacket and pulled out a tablet. I've been collecting evidence for months. Financial records, communications, proof of bribes and cover-ups spanning 20 years. But I needed something big enough to bring it all down, something that would make the public pay attention. She swiped through several files on the screen. Your father's stolen technology? That's the smoking gun I've been looking for. Intellectual property theft with a clear victim, a story simple enough for people to understand and sympathetic enough to make them care. Malik felt the world shift around him. This wasn't just about his father anymore. This was about decades of crimes, lives destroyed, communities poisoned. The flash drive in his pocket contained the key to exposing it all. What are you proposing? An alliance. You give me copies of your evidence, I give you mine. We release everything simultaneously across multiple platforms, social media, news outlets, government agencies. Make it impossible to suppress or discredit. And then what? You think your father's just going to let us walk away? Ray's laugh was bitter. He's not going to let us walk away regardless. The moment you grabbed that drive, you became a dead man walking. The only question is whether you die an anonymous victim or a martyr whose story changes everything. Malik's phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. You have 1 hour to return what you stole. Come to the Western Building, 47th floor. Come alone. If you involve anyone else, your mother pays the price. The blood drained from his face as he read the message aloud. Ania gasped, her hand flying to her throat. They are bluffing, Ray said quickly. They can't actually hurt you or your mother. Too risky, too messy. But even as she said it, Malik could see the doubt in her eyes. Because they both knew that Harrison Weston hadn't built a billion-dollar empire by being squeamish about getting his hands dirty. I have to go, Malik said, pocketing his phone. It's a trap. Of course it's a trap. But what choice do I have? He looked at his mother, saw the fear written across her face like a roadmap of all her worst nightmares. I can't let them hurt her. Then we stick together. All three of us. No. Malik's voice was firm. I won't let you both get hurt because of my choices. Ray stepped closer, and for the first time since she'd introduced herself, Malik saw past the hardened exterior to the scared young woman underneath. You don't understand. If you go alone, if they get that drive back, everyone my father has hurt dies for nothing. The families in Ecuador, the communities he's poisoned, your father, they all stay buried forever. The weight of responsibility settled on Malik's shoulders like a lead blanket. This wasn't just about justice for his family anymore. It was about justice for everyone. What do you need from me? He asked. Ray smiled, and for a moment she looked like the teenager she still was underneath all the pain and determination. Just trust me. And be ready to run. 20 minutes later, across the city in the penthouse office of Western Industries, Harrison Weston stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city he'd spent 30 years conquering. Behind him, his son Damien paced like a caged animal. We should have handled this differently from the beginning, Damien said, his voice tight with frustration. We should have destroyed that kid the moment he set foot in our house. Patience, Harrison replied, not turning from the window. Malik Hartwell is 17 years old. He's scared, alone, and in over his head. Men like that make mistakes. And if he doesn't make mistakes? Now Harrison did turn, his steel-gray eyes cold as winter. Then we help him make them. Victoria Weston entered the office without knocking. Her usually perfect composure cracked around the edges. The board is asking questions. Stock price is down 8% since this afternoon. Someone leaked that we're having internal discussions about intellectual property concerns. Who leaked it? We're still investigating, but... She stopped mid-sentence, her face going pale. Oh God, you don't think Ray? Our daughter has many faults, Harrison said carefully, but family loyalty isn't one of them. But even as he said it, a cold certainty was settling in his chest. Ray had been asking too many questions lately, spending too much time away from home, looking at him with barely concealed disgust during family dinners. He'd assumed it was typical teenage rebellion, but now, his private phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he recognized, his head of security. Sir, we have a problem. Your daughter's car was spotted outside the Hartwell apartment building an hour ago. The room went completely silent. Victoria's wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor, just like it had during the party. The sound of breaking crystal seemed to echo forever. "Are you certain?" Harrison's voice was deadly quiet. "Yes, sir." She was inside for approximately 30 minutes. Harrison closed his eyes, feeling the empire he'd built beginning to crumble around him. Bad enough that some housekeeper's brat had stumbled onto his secrets. But his own daughter, his own flesh and blood turning against him? "Sir, what are your orders?" Harrison opened his eyes and looked out at his city one more time. "Bring them all in. All 3 of them. And prepare for full damage control. Including your daughter, sir. Especially my daughter." As he hung up the phone, Harrison Weston realized that for the first time in 30 years, he was genuinely afraid. Not of losing money or power or prestige, but of losing the one thing he'd never expected to matter, his daughter's love. But it was too late for sentiment now. The war had begun, and in war, there were no family exceptions. Across the city, Malik's phone buzzed one final time. The message was short, devastating, and changed everything. "Your mother is no longer at the apartment. You have 30 minutes to reach the 47th floor, or you'll never see her again." The point of no return had arrived. The Western Industries building pierced the night sky like a gleaming blade, its glass facade reflecting the city lights in fractured patterns that reminded Malik of broken promises. He stood in the shadows across the street, Ray beside him, both of them staring up at the 47th floor where his mother was being held. "Security cameras cover every entrance," Ray whispered, her breath visible in the cold night air. "But there's a service elevator in the parking garage that goes directly to the executive floors. My father uses it when he wants to avoid the main lobbies." Malik's hands were shaking, but not from the cold. 28 minutes. That's how long they had before the deadline, before whatever Harrison Weston had planned for his mother became reality. The thought of Ania alone and afraid in that tower made his chest feel like it was collapsing inward. "This is insane," he muttered. "We're walking into exactly what they want." "No, we're not." Ray pulled out her tablet, fingers flying across the screen. "While they are focused on getting you and the drive upstairs, I'm uploading everything to a secure server. Financial records, environmental crimes, the evidence about your father, all of it goes live automatically if I don't check in every hour. And if they kill us both, then my father's empire dies with us." Her green eyes met his in the dim streetlight, and Malik saw a determination that matched his own. Some things are worth dying for. They moved through the parking garage like ghosts, Ray's keycard granting them access to levels most employees never saw. The service elevator was hidden behind a maintenance door, its interior stark and utilitarian compared to the marble and crystal of the public spaces above. "Malik," Ray said as the elevator began its ascent, "there's something you need to know about tonight. About why my father called you here." The warning in her voice made his stomach clench. "What?" "He's not just going to threaten you. He's going to offer you everything you've ever wanted. Money, education, a future beyond anything you could imagine. And he's going to make it sound reasonable, even generous. I'm not interested in his blood money. I know, but he's very good at finding people's weaknesses, their pressure points. He'll offer to set up a foundation in your father's name, fund scholarships for underprivileged kids, turn your father into a hero while still protecting his own secrets." Ray's voice was heavy with bitter experience. "He'll make you believe you can have justice and security at the same time." The elevator shuddered to a stop at the 47th floor. Through the crack in the doors, Malik could see the opulent reception area of Harrison Weston's private offices, all mahogany and leather and the kind of wealth that whispered rather than shouted. "Remember," Ray said, her hand briefly touching his arm. "Whatever he offers, whatever he promises, it's all built on lies. The moment you give him that drive, you and your mother become liabilities." The elevator doors opened, and they stepped into Harrison Weston's domain. The office was a study in understated power, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined with first editions, abstract art that probably cost more than most people's houses, and a desk large enough to park a car on. But Malik's attention was drawn immediately to the sitting area by the windows, where his mother sat in a leather chair that dwarfed her small frame. Ania looked unharmed but terrified, her eyes wide with relief when she saw him. 2 men in expensive suits flanked her chair, bodyguards, Malik realized, though they looked more like investment bankers than muscle. "Malik." Harrison Weston emerged from the shadows near the bar, a crystal tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. "Thank you for coming. And Ray, darling, what a pleasant surprise." The way he said his daughter's name, warm, affectionate, completely natural, sent ice through Malik's veins. This wasn't the voice of a man who suspected betrayal. This was a father greeting his beloved child. "Hello, Daddy," Ray said, her voice carefully neutral. "I trust you've been helping our young friend here understand the gravity of his situation." Harrison moved to his desk, settling behind it like a king on his throne. The importance of family, of loyalty, of making smart choices. Something like that. Harrison smiled, and Malik caught a glimpse of where Ray had gotten her intensity. "Excellent. Then perhaps we can resolve this unfortunate misunderstanding quickly and painlessly." "Let my mother go," Malik said, his voice steadier than he felt. "This is between you and me." "I'm afraid it's not that simple." Harrison gestured to one of the chairs facing his desk. "Please, sit. Both of you. We have a great deal to discuss." Malik remained standing, his hand instinctively moving to his pocket where the flash drive rested. "I know what you did to my father. I have proof." "Yes, so I've been told. Emails, audio recordings, financial documents. Quite an impressive collection." Harrison's tone was conversational, almost admiring. "Your father was a brilliant man, Malik. Truly brilliant. Do you know what his greatest invention was?" The question caught Malik off guard. "The battery technology you stole." "No." Harrison took a sip of his drink. "His greatest invention was you." The words hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. Malik felt Ray tense beside him, felt his mother's sharp intake of breath from across the room. James Hartwell was many things, a genius, a visionary, a man ahead of his time. But he was also naive about how the world really works. He believed that having the best ideas was enough, that talent would always triumph over politics and power. Harrison stood and walked to the windows, gazing out at his city. "I tried to teach him otherwise. I tried to bring him into the fold, to make him a partner rather than a competitor. By stealing his work and destroying his career. By showing him that ideas without execution are worthless. That innovation without infrastructure is just expensive dreaming." Harrison turned back to face them, his expression earnest, almost paternal. "Do you know how many brilliant inventions die in obscurity because their creators lack the resources to bring them to market? How many world-changing technologies never change anything because the wrong people control them?" Malik felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. This wasn't the cartoon villain he'd expected, the mustache-twirling monster who cackled while ruining lives. This was something far more dangerous, a man who genuinely believed his own justifications. "Your father's battery technology has revolutionized clean energy storage," Harrison continued. "It's in hospitals keeping life support systems running during blackouts. It's in disaster relief centers providing power to refugee camps. It's in remote villages bringing electricity to places that have been dark for centuries." He set down his drink and walked closer to Malik. None of that would have happened if James Hartwell had kept control of his invention. He would have spent years trying to find funding, navigating regulatory approval, fighting patent battles he couldn't afford to win. By the time his technology reached the world, how many people would have suffered in the darkness? "That wasn't your choice to make," Malik said, but his voice sounded weaker than before. "Wasn't it? When you have the power to change the world, don't you have the responsibility to use it, regardless of whose feelings get hurt?" Harrison was close enough now that Malik could smell his expensive cologne. "Your father understood that, eventually. In his last years, when he saw what his technology was accomplishing, he made peace with what had happened." "You're lying." Harrison walked to his desk and pulled out a tablet, swiping to a video file. "This was recorded 6 months before your father died. A video message he left for you, to be delivered when you turned 18. The screen showed James Hartwell sitting in their old apartment, looking older and frailer than Malik remembered. But his eyes were clear, and when he spoke, his voice was steady. "Malik, my son, if you're watching this, then you've learned the truth about my work, about what happened with Harrison Weston and my battery technology. I want you to know that I'm not angry anymore. Not with him, not with the world, not with myself." Malik's legs felt weak. Ray's hand found his arm, steadying him. "I spent years consumed by bitterness, by the injustice of what was taken from me. But I realized something important in these last months. My technology is saving lives, son. It's lighting up the world, bringing hope to places that had none. That's what I always wanted, for my work to matter, to make a difference. The name on the patent doesn't change that." Tears were streaming down Malik's face now, and he couldn't make them stop. I know Harrison Weston isn't a perfect man. I know he's made choices I couldn't have made, done things I couldn't have done. But he took my dream and made it real in ways I never could have. Sometimes the world needs people like him, people willing to get their hands dirty so the rest of us can stay clean. The video paused. The office was completely silent except for the hum of climate control and the distant sound of traffic far below. He forgave me, Malik, Harrison said quietly. In the end, your father understood that we were both working toward the same goal, just using different methods. Malik felt like he was drowning, like everything he'd believed about justice and truth and right and wrong was dissolving around him. His father had forgiven the man who destroyed him? Had made peace with his own betrayal? Of course, Harrison continued. There are other recordings on that drive of yours. Conversations from earlier years, when James was still angry, still fighting. Audio taken out of context, emails that don't tell the full story. In the wrong hands, they could paint a very different picture of what happened. The trap was revealing itself, layer by layer. Not just physical capture, but psychological warfare designed to shatter Malik's certainty, to make him question everything he thought he knew. What do you want? Malik whispered. I want to offer you what I offered your father, partnership instead of opposition. A chance to honor his legacy while building your own future. Harrison returned to his desk and pulled out a thick folder. Full scholarships to any university you choose. A position at Western Industries upon graduation. A charitable foundation established in your father's name, with you as the director. And for your mother, a vice president position managing our employee relations department, because someone who understands the value of hard work and loyalty is exactly what this company needs. Ania gasped. Malik turned to look at her, saw the desperate hope flickering in her eyes. Everything they'd ever dreamed of, everything they'd ever needed, laid out like a feast after years of hunger. Malik. Harrison Weston emerged from the shadows near the bar, a crystal tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. Thank you for coming. And Ray, darling, what a pleasant surprise. The way he said his daughter's name, warm, affectionate, completely natural, sent ice through Malik's veins. This wasn't the voice of a man who suspected betrayal. This was a father greeting his beloved child. Hello, Daddy, Ray said, her voice carefully neutral. I trust you've been helping our young friend here understand the gravity of his situation. Harrison moved to his desk, settling behind it like a king on his throne. The importance of family, of loyalty, of making smart choices. Something like that. Harrison smiled, and Malik caught a glimpse of where Ray had gotten her intensity. Excellent. Then perhaps we can resolve this unfortunate misunderstanding quickly and painlessly. Let my mother go, Malik said, his voice steadier than he felt. This is between you and me. I'm afraid it's not that simple. Harrison gestured to one of the chairs facing his desk. Please, sit. Both of you. We have a great deal to discuss. Malik remained standing, his hand instinctively moving to his pocket where the flash drive rested. I know what you did to my father. I have proof. Yes, so I've been told. Emails, audio recordings, financial documents, quite an impressive collection. Harrison's tone was conversational, almost admiring. Your father was a brilliant man, Malik. Truly brilliant. Do you know what his greatest invention was? The question caught Malik off guard. The battery technology you stole. No. Harrison took a sip of his drink. His greatest invention was you. The words hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. Malik felt Ray tense beside him, felt his mother's sharp intake of breath from across the room. James Hartwell was many things, a genius, a visionary, a man ahead of his time. But he was also naive about how the world really works. He believed that having the best ideas was enough, that talent would always triumph over politics and power. Harrison stood and walked to the windows, gazing out at his city. I tried to teach him otherwise. I tried to bring him into the fold, to make him a partner rather than a competitor. By stealing his work and destroying his career. By showing him that ideas without execution are worthless. That innovation without infrastructure is just expensive dreaming. Harrison turned back to face them, his expression earnest, almost paternal. Do you know how many brilliant inventions die in obscurity because their creators lack the resources to bring them to market? How many world-changing technologies never change anything because the wrong people control them? Malik felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. This wasn't the cartoon villain he'd expected, the mustache-twirling monster who cackled while ruining lives. This was something far more dangerous, a man who genuinely believed his own justifications. Your father's battery technology has revolutionized clean energy storage, Harrison continued. It's in hospitals keeping life support systems running during blackouts. It's in disaster relief centers providing power to refugee camps. It's in remote villages bringing electricity to places that have been dark for centuries. He set down his drink and walked closer to Malik. None of that would have happened if James Hartwell had kept control of his invention. He would have spent years trying to find funding, navigating regulatory approval, fighting patent battles he couldn't afford to win. By the time his technology reached the world, how many people would have suffered in the darkness? That wasn't your choice to make, Malik said, but his voice sounded weaker than before. Wasn't it? When you have the power to change the world, don't you have the responsibility to use it, regardless of whose feelings get hurt? Harrison was close enough now that Malik could smell his expensive cologne. Your father understood that, eventually. In his last years, when he saw what his technology was accomplishing, he made peace with what had happened. You're lying. Harrison walked to his desk and pulled out a tablet, swiping to a video file. This was recorded 6 months before your father died. A video message he left for you, to be delivered when you turned 18. The screen showed James Hartwell sitting in their old apartment, looking older and frailer than Malik remembered. But his eyes were clear, and when he spoke, his voice was steady. Malik, my son, if you're watching this, then you've learned the truth about my work, about what happened with Harrison Weston and my battery technology. I want you to know that I'm not angry anymore. Not with him, not with the world, not with myself. Malik's legs felt weak. Ray's hand found his arm, steadying him. I spent years consumed by bitterness, by the injustice of what was taken from me. But I realized something important in these last months. My technology is saving lives, son. It's lighting up the world, bringing hope to places that had none. That's what I always wanted, for my work to matter, to make a difference. The name on the patent doesn't change that. Tears were streaming down Malik's face now, and he couldn't make them stop. I know Harrison Weston isn't a perfect man. I know he's made choices I couldn't have made, done things I couldn't have done. But he took my dream and made it real in ways I never could have. Sometimes the world needs people like him, people willing to get their hands dirty so the rest of us can stay clean. The video paused. The office was completely silent except for the hum of climate control and the distant sound of traffic far below. He forgave me, Malik, Harrison said quietly. In the end, your father understood that we were both working toward the same goal, just using different methods. Malik felt like he was drowning, like everything he'd believed about justice and truth and right and wrong was dissolving around him. His father had forgiven the man who destroyed him, had made peace with his own betrayal. Of course, Harrison continued, there are other recordings on that drive of yours. Conversations from earlier years, when James was still angry, still fighting. Audio taken out of context, emails that don't tell the full story. In the wrong hands, they could paint a very different picture of what happened. The trap was revealing itself, layer by layer. Not just physical capture, but psychological warfare designed to shatter Malik's certainty, to make him question everything he thought he knew. What do you want? Malik whispered. I want to offer you what I offered your father, partnership instead of opposition. A chance to honor his legacy while building your own future. Harrison returned to his desk and pulled out a thick folder. Full scholarships to any university you choose. A position at Western Industries upon graduation. A charitable foundation established in your father's name, with you as the director. And for your mother, a vice president position managing our employee relations department, because someone who understands the value of hard work and loyalty is exactly what this company needs. Ania gasped. Malik turned to look at her, saw the desperate hope flickering in her eyes. Everything they'd ever dreamed of, everything they'd ever needed, laid out like a feast after years of hunger. Ania gasped. Malik turned to look at her, saw the desperate hope flickering in her eyes. Everything they'd ever dreamed of, everything they'd ever needed, laid out like a feast after years of hunger. All I need in return, Harrison said, is that flash drive, and your promise that this unfortunate misunderstanding stays between us. Ray's grip on Malik's arm tightened. When he looked at her, he saw his own conflict reflected in her face. Because Harrison Weston's offer wasn't just generous, it was everything they could have wanted, gift-wrapped and handed to them with a bow. And if I refuse? Harrison's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. Then you'll leave here tonight with nothing but the clothes on your back. The drive will be confiscated as stolen property. Your mother will lose her job, and I'll make sure no one in this city ever hires either of you again. You'll disappear into poverty and obscurity, and your father's real legacy, the millions of lives his technology has improved, will be forgotten in favor of a tragic story about a bitter young man who chose destruction over progress. The ultimatum hung in the air like a sword. Everything or nothing. Justice or survival. Truth or family. Malik's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The server upload is complete. Everything is ready to go live. Just say the word. T. Trinity Kenneby. The fake journalist who had tried to trick him at the diner. Except, what if she wasn't fake? What if Ray's automatic upload system was working, and Trinity was really a journalist who had been monitoring the situation? I need a minute to think, Malik said. Of course. This is a big decision. Harrison's smile was understanding, paternal. Take all the time you need. But even as he said it, Malik noticed one of the bodyguards checking his watch, saw Victoria Weston slip quietly into the office from a side door. Saw Ray's face go pale as she recognized something he'd missed. The offer was real. The deadline was not. They were never meant to leave this office alive. Malik stared at his phone screen, the message from Trinity burning into his retinas. Everything was ready to go live. All he had to do was give the word, and Harrison Weston's empire would crumble. But as he looked around the opulent office, at his mother's terrified face, at Ray's tense posture, at the bodyguards positioning themselves strategically around the room, he realized something that made his blood turn to ice. They were never supposed to leave this room alive, regardless of his choice. You're stalling, Harrison observed, his tone still conversational but with an edge of steel underneath. That's understandable. It's a big decision. Life-changing, one might say. Victoria Weston moved closer to Ania's chair, her manicured hand resting on the back of it in a gesture that looked maternal but felt threatening. Perhaps your son needs some additional motivation to make the right choice. No, Ray said sharply, stepping protectively toward Malik. We had a deal. No one gets hurt if he cooperates. Harrison's eyebrows rose slightly. We. Interesting choice of words, darling. Something in his tone made Ray freeze. Malik felt the atmosphere in the room shift, like the pressure drop before a storm. Daddy, do you know what I find most fascinating about this entire situation? Harrison interrupted, settling back into his chair with the casual confidence of a man holding all the cards. It's not that a 17-year-old boy managed to find evidence I've kept hidden for 15 years. It's not even that he was brave enough to confront me with it. He paused to take a sip of his drink, letting the silence stretch taut. It's that he was so eager to trust the first person who offered to help him. Malik's stomach dropped. What are you talking about? Tell him, Ray. Or should I? Ray's face had gone completely white. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Malik, I can explain. Explain what? But even as he asked, the pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. Ray's convenient appearance at his apartment. Her inside knowledge of the Weston family operations. The way she'd guided him here, to this room, at exactly the right time. Ray Parker isn't my daughter, Harrison said, his voice warm with paternal pride. She's my protégé, my most talented employee. And for the past 6 months, she's been investigating you and your family, waiting for exactly this opportunity. The betrayal hit Malik like a physical blow. He staggered backward, his hand instinctively moving to his pocket where the flash drive rested. The environmental scientist in Ecuador. Ray's voice was hollow, defeated. He was real. My father really did have him killed. But not to protect Western Industries, to protect a shell company that was secretly gathering evidence on their environmental crimes. I was the one who ordered his death, Malik. I was the one who decided his life was worth less than the mission. The world tilted sideways. Everything Ray had told him, every moment of connection he'd felt with her, every spark of attraction and understanding, all of it had been carefully constructed lies. The tablet she showed you. Harrison continued, as if discussing the weather. The evidence of my supposed crimes. All fabricated. Quite convincing, though. Ray has a real talent for this kind of work. But the flash drive, Malik said desperately. The real evidence I found is absolutely genuine, Harrison confirmed. Every email, every audio recording, every document that proves I stole your father's technology and destroyed his career. All of it true. Malik felt like he was drowning in confusion. Then why? Because sometimes the truth is the best weapon of all. Harrison stood and walked to a wall-mounted screen, touching a control panel that brought it to life. Let me show you something else that's true. The screen displayed security footage from the apartment building where Malik and his mother lived. The timestamp showed it was from 3 hours ago. In the grainy black and white image, Malik watched his mother walk to her car in the parking garage, but she wasn't alone. She was talking to Victoria Weston, and their conversation looked anything but hostile. "What is this?" Malik whispered. Harrison touched another control, and audio began playing over the video. "Are you sure he'll come?" Victoria's voice. "He'll come. My boy would do anything to protect me." Ania's voice, clear and calm. "And you're prepared to follow through? Even if it means..." "I've been preparing for this moment for 15 years. Ever since James died and left us with nothing but debt and broken dreams. Malik deserves better than the life his father could have given him." The recording stopped. Malik felt like someone had reached into his chest and ripped out his heart with their bare hands. "Your mother contacted us 6 months ago," Harrison explained gently. "She'd heard rumors about James's work being incorporated into Western Industries products. She wanted to know if there was any truth to the stories. She's been working with you this whole time. Working with us, working for her son's future. Is there really a difference?" Victoria had moved to stand beside Ania's chair, her hand now resting on his mother's shoulder in a gesture of obvious familiarity. "When we told her about the full extent of James's contributions to our success, she saw an opportunity to finally give you the life you deserved." Malik's legs gave out. He collapsed into one of the leather chairs, his mind reeling as everything he thought he knew rearranged itself into a new, horrible pattern. "The drive was never hidden," he realized. "You left it where I could find it. Ania mentioned that you were curious about your father's work, that you'd been asking questions." Harrison's tone was almost apologetic. "We needed you to discover the truth on your own, to feel the righteous anger that would make you a credible whistleblower. A son seeking justice for his father's stolen legacy, it's a compelling narrative. But I found evidence of your crimes. Real evidence. Evidence that we've had plenty of time to prepare for. Sealed settlements with key witnesses, documents that will mysteriously disappear, digital files that will be dismissed as deepfakes." Harrison returned to his seat behind the desk. "By the time the dust settles, you'll look like a disturbed young man who fabricated an elaborate conspiracy theory to explain his family's failures." Ray finally spoke, her voice thick with something that sounded like genuine remorse. "The plan was never to hurt you, Malik. We were going to offer you everything we promised. The scholarships, the foundation, the future. All you had to do was play your part, be the face of a scandal that we could control and contain. And if I refused, then you'd disappear," Victoria said matter-of-factly. "A tragic accident, a random crime, a young man who couldn't handle the pressure of his discoveries. These things happen in the city." Malik looked at his mother, searching her face for some sign that this was all another lie, another manipulation. But what he saw there was resignation, determination, and something that looked almost like relief. "Why?" he asked her. "Why did you do this to me?" Ania's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was steady. "Because I love you more than I loved your father. Because I couldn't watch you waste your life chasing ghosts and fighting battles you could never win." She leaned forward in her chair, her hands clasped together. "Your father died bitter and broken, baby. He spent his last years consumed by anger and injustice, and it killed him as surely as any disease. I won't let that happen to you. So you sold me out. I saved you. From poverty, from mediocrity, from the kind of hopeless rage that destroys everything it touches." Tears were streaming down her face now. "The Westons are offering you everything we've ever dreamed of. A real future, real power, real influence. All you have to do is accept it." Malik's phone buzzed again. Another message from Trinity. "Upload starting now. Story goes live in 60 seconds. Brace yourself." He stared at the screen, realizing with dawning horror that even this, his supposed backup plan, his ace in the hole, had probably been orchestrated. Trinity Kenneby, the mysterious journalist who just happened to contact him at the perfect moment, who just happened to be monitoring the situation. "Trinity works for you too," he said. It wasn't a question. Harrison smiled. "Trinity Kenneby is one of our best crisis management specialists. When the story breaks in," he checked his watch, 4 to 5 seconds, "it will paint you as a troubled young man who hacked into private servers and fabricated evidence to support his delusions. Very tragic. Very believable. Every ally, every hope, every moment of connection had been a lie." Malik was completely alone, surrounded by people who had spent months manipulating him into this exact position. Of course, Harrison continued, there's still time to change the narrative. One word from me, and the story becomes about a brilliant young man who uncovered historical injustices and worked with the Weston family to create positive change. A partnership built on mutual respect and shared values. Malik looked around the room one final time. At Ray, whose green eyes still held traces of what looked like genuine affection beneath the professional calculation. At his mother, whose love for him had driven her to betray everything he believed in. At Harrison Weston, who had turned his entire life into a chess game where he'd never even known he was a piece. The flash drive in his pocket felt like it was burning through the fabric. The one real thing in a world of constructed lies, the one piece of truth that hadn't been manufactured for his consumption. You made one mistake, Malik said quietly. Harrison raised an eyebrow. Oh, you assumed I cared more about winning than about being right. Before anyone could react, Malik pulled out his phone and typed a single word, now. The room erupted into chaos as alarms began blaring throughout the building, as emergency lights bathed everything in red, as the elevators locked down and security protocols engaged. But Malik wasn't looking at any of that. He was looking at Ray, at the moment when her professional mask finally slipped completely and he saw the real person underneath, someone who had genuinely cared for him, even while destroying him. I'm sorry, she whispered, and for the first time since he'd met her, Malik believed she was telling the truth. It didn't matter. The truth was a luxury he could no longer afford. The war was just beginning. The emergency alarms weren't coming from the building's security system. They were coming from every phone, every tablet, every screen in the Western Industries tower as emergency broadcasts interrupted regular programming across the city. This is Channel 7 News with a breaking story. We're receiving reports of a massive data breach at Western Industries, with thousands of internal documents now being released to the public in real time. Harrison Weston's face went ashen as he grabbed the remote and switched between news channels. Every station was running the same story, showing the same leaked documents scrolling across their screens. But these weren't the fabricated files Ray had prepared. These were real. What did you do? Ray whispered, staring at Malik with a mixture of horror and admiration. Malik pulled the flash drive from his pocket, but instead of the sleek black device Harrison expected, it was white and worn, with a small crack along one edge. This isn't the drive I found in your father's study. This is the one my father gave me 3 years ago, before he died. The one he told me to keep safe until I was old enough to understand what it meant. The blood drained from Harrison's face. That's impossible. We monitored James constantly. He had no access to our servers, no way to. No way except through the backdoor he built into his own technology. Malik's voice was steadier than he felt. Every battery system, every power grid, every device that uses his invention, they all have a hidden protocol that he could access remotely. For 3 years, he watched you build an empire on his work. For 3 years, he documented every lie, every crime, every life you destroyed. The screens around the office were now showing financial records, environmental reports, communications with government officials. 15 years of evidence that couldn't be dismissed as fabrication because it was coming directly from Western Industries' own secure servers. The now message activated the protocol, Malik continued. Everything my father collected, everything he witnessed, it's all broadcasting simultaneously to every major news outlet, government agency, and social media platform in the world. You can't stop it, you can't contain it, and you can't discredit it because it's coming from your own systems. Victoria rushed to her phone, frantically dialing. The servers, can we shut them down? Already tried, one of the bodyguards reported, his own phone pressed to his ear. The protocol has administrative override. It's locked us out of our own network. Harrison sank into his chair, watching 30 years of carefully constructed power crumble in real time. James always was smarter than I gave him credit for. He trusted you, Malik said, his voice thick with emotion. He believed you were his friend, right up until the moment you destroyed him. That's why he built the backdoor, not because he suspected you, but because he wanted to share his greatest achievement with someone he cared about. On the screens, a particularly damaging audio file was playing. Harrison's voice, cold and calculating, discussing the murder of the environmental scientist in Ecuador. Not fabricated, not taken out of context, but crystal clear evidence of conspiracy to commit murder. Ray, Harrison said quietly, not taking his eyes off the screens. How much of this did you know about? Ray was staring at her tablet, watching as her own fabricated evidence was being systematically exposed and discredited alongside the real crimes. None of it. I thought I had mapped every piece of data in your system. Apparently, you missed a few things. Harrison's tone was conversational, but there was something lethal underneath it. Expensive mistakes have expensive consequences. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Ray took an involuntary step backward, suddenly looking very young and very vulnerable. Daddy, I can fix this. I can spin the narrative, control the damage. With what credibility? Your cover is blown, your fabricated evidence is being exposed, and half the content broadcasting right now has your digital fingerprints on it. Harrison stood slowly, his movements predatory. The world is about to learn that Ray Parker, environmental activist and investigative journalist, is actually Priya Volkov, corporate spy and professional manipulator. Ray, Priya, went completely white. You wouldn't. I have no choice. Someone has to take the fall for this, and it certainly won't be me. Harrison moved to his desk and pulled out a thick file. Priya Volkov, age 22, expelled from 3 universities for hacking and fraud. Suspected of industrial espionage across 4 countries. Currently wanted by Interpol for identity theft. That's not who I am anymore. It's who you've always been. I just gave you better targets. Harrison's voice was ice-cold now, all paternal warmth evaporated. The story will be simple. A disturbed young woman with a history of criminal behavior infiltrated Western industries and manipulated a naive teenager into helping her fabricate evidence against the company. Very tragic. Very believable. Malik watched in horror as the woman he'd trusted, feared, and somewhere deep down begun to care for was systematically destroyed by the man she'd served loyally for months. What about everything I did for you? Priya's voice was breaking. The people I hurt, the lives I destroyed. Was any of it real? Your employment was real. Your paycheck was real. The rest was just business. Harrison returned to his seat as if they were discussing quarterly reports. Victoria, contact our legal team. I want Priya arrested for corporate espionage within the hour. Make sure the charges stick. Wait, Malik said, surprising himself with his own voice. Let her go. Everyone in the room turned to stare at him. Harrison's eyebrows rose slightly. Excuse me. You want a fall guy? Take me. I'm the one who triggered the data release. I'm the one who brought down your empire. Malik stepped closer to Priya, close enough to see the tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. She was just doing her job. How noble. How utterly pointless. Harrison's laugh was bitter. You're 17 years old, Malik. You have no money, no power, no influence. Destroying you would be like stepping on an ant. But Priya here, she's a real threat. She knows too much, has skills that could be used against us, connections that could cause problems down the line. Priya looked at Malik with something that might have been gratitude, or might have been pity. You don't understand what you're offering. When they are done with me, there won't be anything left. No identity, no history, no life. I'll disappear completely. Then run, Malik said quietly. Right now, while they are distracted. Get out of the city, out of the country. Start over somewhere else. With what resources? My accounts are already frozen, my identity's compromised. I have nothing. Malik reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope he'd been carrying since leaving the apartment. My college fund. It's not much, but it's something. The gesture was so unexpected, so impossibly kind given everything she'd done to him, that Priya actually gasped. Why would you help me? Because you're right about one thing. Some people deserve better than the life they were born into. Malik glanced at his mother, who was watching the exchange with an expression he couldn't read. And because even if everything else was a lie, I think you caring about me wasn't completely fake. For a moment, the corporate spy, the professional manipulator, the woman who had orchestrated his downfall, looked like what she really was underneath it all, a scared young person who had made too many bad choices and run out of second chances. The romantic notion is touching, Harrison interrupted, but ultimately irrelevant. No one is leaving this room until we determine how to contain this disaster. You can't contain it, Malik said. The data release is automatic and distributed. Every major news organization in the world is already running the story. Government agencies are opening investigations. Your stock price is in free fall. Then we move to contingency plans. Harrison pressed a button on his desk, and the office doors locked with an audible click. Sometimes the only way to stop a fire is to remove all the oxygen. The bodyguards moved closer, their hands moving inside their jackets. Ania made a small, frightened sound. "You're talking about murder," Victoria said, her voice hollow. "Harrison, we can't." "We can't what?" "Let them walk out of here and spend the rest of our lives in prison. Let everything we've built be destroyed by a dead man's revenge." Harrison's mask of civilized control was finally slipping, revealing the monster underneath. Sometimes difficult situations require difficult solutions. Malik realized with crystal clarity that they were all going to die in this office. Not because of justice or revenge or corporate strategy, but because Harrison Weston was cornered and desperate men with unlimited resources were the most dangerous creatures on Earth. The emergency broadcasts were still playing on every screen, the evidence of Western Industries' crimes scrolling past like an endless confession. But it didn't matter anymore. Truth was a luxury that only the living could afford. "There is another option," Priya said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. She was staring out the window at the city below, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. The building's emergency systems. If there was a catastrophic failure, a gas leak, an electrical fire, something that required immediate evacuation, everyone would have to leave. Including us. "And how exactly would you trigger such a failure?" Harrison asked, though there was a new wariness in his voice. Priya smiled, and for the first time since Malik had met her, the expression was entirely genuine. "The same way your father's protocol accessed your servers. Every system in this building runs on smart technology, connected to the network. And I know every backdoor, every vulnerability, every way to make machines do things they were never designed to do." She pulled out her tablet, fingers flying across the screen. "The question is, are you willing to sacrifice your headquarters to save your empire?" Harrison stared at her for a long moment, calculations running behind his eyes. The building was worth hundreds of millions, but his freedom was priceless. "Do it," he said finally. And in that moment, Malik understood that this was never going to end. Not tonight, not ever. Even if they escaped, even if they survived, Harrison Weston would spend the rest of his life hunting them. He had too much to lose and too many resources to simply let them disappear. The only way this ended was if one of them didn't walk away. As Priya's fingers worked their digital magic and the building's systems began to fail around them, Malik made a decision that would change everything. He wasn't running anymore. The building shuddered around them as Priya's digital sabotage took hold. Emergency lighting bathed the office in hellish red, and somewhere in the distance, fire alarms began their insistent wail. But Malik barely noticed the chaos because he was staring at his mother's face, finally seeing her clearly for the first time in his life. "You never intended to leave with me, did you?" he asked quietly. Ania's composure cracked just slightly. "Baby, I don't know what you mean." "The video message from Dad. The one Harrison showed me." Malik's voice was steady now, cutting through the noise and confusion like a blade. Dad didn't make peace with what happened. That wasn't forgiveness in his voice, it was defeat. He'd given up. Harrison was barking orders into his phone, trying to coordinate an evacuation while maintaining control of the situation, but Malik ignored him. His entire focus was on his mother, on the woman who had raised him, sacrificed for him, and ultimately betrayed him. "You edited it," Malik continued. "Took his words out of context, spliced together pieces to create a message that never existed. How long have you been planning this?" Tears were streaming down Ania's face now, but her voice remained steady. "Since the day your father died. Since the day I realized that his genius meant nothing without power, that truth means nothing without influence. So you decided to sell me to the people who killed him. I decided to give you a future worth having." The words exploded out of her with 15 years of pent-up frustration. "Your father was brilliant, baby, but he was naive. He believed that being right was enough, that the world would recognize his genius and reward him for it. Look where that belief got him, dead at 42, broke and forgotten." The building shuddered again, more violently this time. Priya was still working at her tablet, sweat beading on her forehead as she navigated through layers of security protocols. "The gas lines are compromised," she reported. "We have maybe 10 minutes before this whole floor becomes uninhabitable." "Then we need to move," Victoria said, moving toward the door. "Harrison, we can continue this discussion somewhere safer." "No." Malik's voice stopped everyone in their tracks. "We finish this here. Now." Harrison looked at him with something that might have been respect. "You realize that if you stay, you die. We all die. Maybe. But at least the truth dies with us, instead of being buried under another layer of lies. Malik pulled out his phone, fingers moving quickly across the screen. I'm not running anymore, Mr. Weston. I'm not accepting your bribes or your threats or your carefully constructed reality. I'm choosing to stand exactly where my father should have stood 15 years ago. What are you doing? Priya asked, looking up from her tablet. Activating the final protocol. Malik's thumbs moved with surprising steadiness as he typed a long message. My father built more than just a backdoor into his technology. He built a dead man's switch. If the right sequence is entered, every piece of evidence he collected, not just about Western Industries, but about every company that benefited from stolen technology, every government official who helped cover it up, every victim who was silenced, all of it gets released simultaneously. Harrison went very still. You're bluffing. Am I? Your building is about to explode. Your servers are compromised. Your empire is crumbling in real time. And you're trapped in a room with 3 people who have every reason to destroy you. Does this seem like a situation where I'd be bluffing? The truth was, Malik wasn't entirely sure the dead man's switch existed. His father had mentioned it once, during one of his darker moments near the end. But it could have been the delusion of a broken man. But Harrison didn't know that, and sometimes uncertainty was the most powerful weapon of all. What do you want? Harrison asked. I want you to choose. Malik's finger hovered over the send button. The same choice you gave my father 15 years ago. Give up everything you've built, confess to every crime you've committed, and maybe, some of the people you've hurt will get justice. Or stay silent, and watch everything burn anyway. That's not a choice. That's suicide. Yes, it is. The same suicide you forced on my father when you took away his life's work and left him with nothing but the knowledge that he'd been betrayed by someone he trusted. Ania stood up from her chair, her movement sudden and desperate. Malik, stop this. Please. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand perfectly. I'm choosing truth over comfort, justice over safety. I'm choosing to be my father's son instead of your commodity. The words hit Ania like physical blows. She staggered backward, her hand flying to her throat. I did everything for you. Everything. You did everything for the version of me you wanted me to become. The grateful, obedient son who would accept your choices without question. Malik's voice was soft now, almost gentle. But I'm not that person, Mama. I never was. Priya looked up from her tablet, her face pale. Malik, whatever you're planning, you need to do it now. The building's structural integrity is compromised. If we don't evacuate in the next 5 minutes, then we don't evacuate. Malik turned to face Harrison directly. 15 years ago, you told my father that men like him tend to solve their problems themselves when their life's work is taken away. You were counting on him to give up, to destroy himself rather than fight back. It was a calculated risk. Well, here's another calculated risk for you. Malik held up his phone, thumb still hovering over the send button. I'm James Hartwell's son. I have his genius, his determination, and his stubborn refusal to accept injustice. But I also have something he didn't, nothing left to lose. Harrison's facade of control finally cracked completely. You think destroying me will bring him back? You think burning down everything I've built will somehow balance the scales? No, but it will mean that other fathers don't die thinking they are failures. Other sons don't grow up believing their parents weren't good enough, smart enough, strong enough to matter. Malik's voice was rising now, fueled by 15 years of accumulated pain. It will mean that truth matters more than power, that justice matters more than profit. Idealistic nonsense, Victoria spat. The world doesn't work that way. Then maybe it's time to change how the world works. The building shook again, and this time pieces of ceiling plaster rained down around them. Emergency evacuation announcements echoed through the halls, but the office remained sealed, locked down by security protocols that had become a trap. Choose, Malik said again. Confess everything, face the consequences of your actions, and maybe some good comes from this disaster. Or stay silent and we all die here together, 3 generations destroyed by your pride. Harrison looked around the room, at his empire burning on the screens, at his wife's terrified face, at the young man who had somehow backed him into an impossible corner. For the first time in 30 years, Harrison Weston was facing a problem that couldn't be solved with money or threats or carefully constructed lies. You want the truth? Harrison asked, his voice hollow. Here's the truth. Your father was weak. Brilliant, but weak. He had the mind to change the world but not the stomach to do what it takes to actually change it. I took his invention and made it matter, made it real, made it save lives. Without me, his battery technology would have died with him, another brilliant idea lost to history because its creator was too pure to get his hands dirty. And the people you killed, the communities you poisoned, the lives you destroyed building your empire. Necessary sacrifices. You can't make an omelet without breaking eggs. Harrison was standing now, his voice gaining strength as he fell back on the justifications that had sustained him for decades. Every innovation, every advancement, every step forward in human progress requires someone to make the hard choices, to bear the moral burden so others don't have to. That's not your choice to make. It's exactly my choice to make. That's what power means, the responsibility to decide who lives and who dies, who succeeds and who fails, who gets remembered and who gets forgotten. Harrison's eyes were blazing now, all pretense of civilized discourse abandoned. Your father could have been part of something greater than himself, but he chose pride over progress. Just like you're choosing revenge over reason. Malik looked at this man who had destroyed his family, who had built an empire on stolen dreams and justified it with the kind of cold logic that turned human beings into statistics. And he realized that Harrison Weston would never confess, never admit wrongdoing, never accept responsibility for the pain he'd caused. Because to do so would mean acknowledging that his entire life had been built on a lie. Then I choose differently, Malik said quietly. He pressed send. Somewhere in the digital void, servers began processing the most complex data release in history. Not just Western Industries' crimes, but a web of corruption and complicity that spanned decades and continents. The dead man's switch that James Hartwell had built as his final act of defiance was finally activated, 15 years after his death. The screens around the office went dark as the building's emergency systems began their final shutdown sequence. In the distance, the sound of sirens grew louder. "What have you done?" Harrison whispered. "What my father should have done 15 years ago," Malik replied. "I chose truth." The office was plunged into darkness as the building's power grid failed completely. Emergency lighting flickered once and died. In the blackness, Malik heard his mother crying, heard Harrison's ragged breathing, heard Priya's fingers still working frantically at her tablet. "Malik," Ania's voice was broken, desperate. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, baby." "I know, Mama. But it's too late for sorry." "The gas levels are critical," Priya announced, her voice eerily calm in the darkness. "We have maybe 2 minutes before this becomes lethal." "Then it's over," Victoria said. "We're all going to die here." But Malik was smiling in the darkness, feeling a peace he hadn't experienced since his father's death. Because for the first time in his life, he'd made a choice that was entirely his own. Not influenced by fear or manipulation or the desperate love of a mother who had lost herself trying to save him. He'd chosen to be his father's son. The truth was out there now, spreading through the digital world like wildfire. It couldn't be stopped, couldn't be contained, couldn't be buried under layers of corporate spin and legal maneuvering. James Hartwell's legacy would finally be what it should have been all along. The building groaned around them, steel and concrete beginning to fail under the pressure of compromised systems. They had minutes, maybe less. But Malik had done what he came to do. In the darkness, he heard a sound that changed everything, the heavy chunk of emergency locks disengaging. Light spilled into the office from the hallway beyond as the doors swung open. "Emergency evacuation," voices shouted. "Everyone out. Now!" "How?" Harrison started to ask. "I may be a professional liar," Priya said, "but I'm not a killer. The gas leak was real, but I programmed a delay into the lockdown protocol. The doors would open automatically when the danger became critical." As they stumbled toward the exit, guided by emergency personnel with flashlights and oxygen masks, Malik realized that the impossible choice hadn't been between truth and survival after all. It had been between the person he was and the person he was meant to become. And for the first time in his life, he'd chosen correctly. The emergency evacuation of Western Industries became the most watched live news event in decades. Helicopters circled the 50-story tower as fire crews battled the spreading damage, their spotlights cutting through smoke that billowed from multiple floors. But the real drama wasn't happening in the building. It was happening in the digital realm, where James Hartwell's final protocol was unleashing 15 years of carefully collected evidence across every connected device on the planet. Malik stood in the command center that emergency services had set up across the street, watching the chaos unfold through floor-to-ceiling windows that reflected the emergency lights in fractured patterns. His mother sat beside him, her face hollow with exhaustion and something that looked like grief. They hadn't spoken since leaving the building, but her presence felt different now, smaller somehow, as if the weight of her deception had physically diminished her. The data release is accelerating, Trinity Kennedy announced from her position at a bank of monitors. She wasn't the fake journalist Malik had expected, but she wasn't working for the Westons either. She was something far more dangerous, a real investigative reporter who had been tracking corporate corruption for years, waiting for exactly this moment. How accelerating? Malik asked. Your father didn't just document Western Industries' crimes. He mapped an entire network of corporate corruption spanning 3 decades and 12 countries. Oil companies covering up environmental disasters, pharmaceutical companies suppressing life-saving research, defense contractors selling weapons to terrorist organizations. All of it connected, all of it protected by the same web of money and power. On the screens around them, news anchors struggled to keep up with the flood of revelations. Stock markets were crashing in real time as investors fled companies whose darkest secrets were being broadcast to the world. Government officials were resigning rather than face the corruption charges that would inevitably follow. This is bigger than we imagined, Trinity continued, her fingers flying across her tablet as she tried to catalog the tsunami of evidence. Your father wasn't just a victim of corporate theft, he was a whistleblower on a global scale. He spent 3 years building the most comprehensive database of corporate crime in history. Malik felt the ground shift beneath his feet as the true scope of his father's work became clear. He knew he was going to die. More than that, he planned for it. Every company that benefited from his stolen technology, every government contract built on false pretenses, every victim silenced by threats or money, he documented all of it. Trinity pulled up a file that made Malik's blood run cold, including evidence that Harrison Weston had him killed. The medical records filled the screen, autopsy reports, toxicology findings, witness statements that had been buried for 15 years. James Hartwell hadn't died of a heart attack caused by stress. He'd been poisoned with a compound that mimicked cardiac arrest, administered by someone he trusted. The housekeeper who found him, Trinity said quietly. Maria Santos. She disappeared 3 days after your father's death, but not before she recorded this. The audio quality was poor, recorded on an old phone in a moment of panic, but Maria's voice was clear. They came to the house the night before. 2 men in expensive suits. I heard them talking to Mr. James in his study. Something about making it look natural and loose ends. I was scared, so I hid. But I heard everything. Malik's vision blurred. His father hadn't just been robbed and broken, he'd been murdered. And the woman who could have provided testimony had been eliminated to protect the secret. Why didn't this come out during the investigation? Because there was no investigation. James Hartwell was a disgraced engineer who died of stress-related cardiac arrest. Nobody looked too closely at the death of a failure. Trinity's voice was heavy with bitter irony. But your father knew they would come for him eventually. That's why he built the dead man's switch, not just to expose the theft of his technology, but to ensure his murder didn't go unpunished. Across the command center, Harrison Weston sat in a folding chair surrounded by federal agents, his expensive suit torn and stained with smoke. His empire was crumbling around him in real time, but he maintained the dignified composure of a man who had always known this day might come. Mr. Weston, Agent Patricia Blake approached with a tablet in her hands. We need to discuss the charges being filed against you. Harrison looked up, his steel-gray eyes still calculating despite his circumstances. I assume my lawyers are being contacted. Your lawyers are currently being arrested on charges of conspiracy and obstruction of justice. The evidence being released includes detailed records of their involvement in covering up multiple felonies. Agent Blake sat down across from him. You're looking at charges in 12 countries, including murder, environmental terrorism, and crimes against humanity. For the first time since Malik had known him, Harrison Weston looked genuinely afraid. However, Agent Blake continued, there might be an opportunity for cooperation. The scope of this conspiracy extends far beyond Western Industries. Names, locations, methods, full cooperation could significantly reduce your sentence. Harrison's gaze drifted across the command center until it found Malik. For a long moment, the two stared at each other across the chaos, the man who had destroyed a family and the son who had brought down an empire. The boy played his father's game better than I did, Harrison said finally. James Hartwell won after all. Near the medical station, Priya was being treated for smoke inhalation by paramedics, but her attention was focused on her laptop screen. The evidence being released included her own fabricated files, exposed now as obvious forgeries next to the authentic documentation. Her cover as Ray Parker was blown, her identity as Priya Volkov confirmed, but something unexpected was happening. Becomes lethal. The international community is treating me as a protected witness, she called to Malik. Apparently, corporate espionage becomes whistleblowing when the corporation is committing crimes against humanity. Malik walked over to where she sat on the ambulance bumper, oxygen mask hanging loose around her neck. Are you going to take the deal? I don't know. Testifying against the Westons means admitting to things I've done, people I've hurt. She looked up at him with those green eyes that had once seemed so calculating and now just looked tired. Some of those people were good people who didn't deserve what happened to them. Then testify for them too. Make sure their stories get told. You really think redemption is that simple? Malik considered the question, thinking about his mother's desperate attempt to secure his future, about Harrison's genuine belief that his crimes served a greater good, about his own choice to activate a protocol that had set the world on fire. I think redemption is the only thing that's never simple, he said finally. But that doesn't make it impossible. Priya smiled, not the practiced expression of a professional manipulator, but the genuine smile of someone who had been given an unexpected second chance. Your father raised a good son. My father never got the chance to raise me, but maybe he left me everything I needed anyway. As dawn broke over the city, the full scope of James Hartwell's legacy became clear. The dead man's switch hadn't just exposed corporate corruption, it had triggered a global awakening. Environmental activists were using the released evidence to shut down illegal dumping operations. Human rights organizations were rescuing victims of corporate-sponsored violence. Governments were being forced to confront decades of complicity with criminal enterprises. 17 separate countries have opened investigations, Trinity reported, her voice hoarse from hours of non-stop reporting. The UN is calling for an international tribunal. The World Court is preparing charges for crimes against humanity. How many people will face justice? Malik asked. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Your father's evidence doesn't just prove individual crimes. It exposes the entire system that made those crimes possible. Trinity looked up from her screens with something like awe in her eyes. This is the largest coordinated exposure of corporate crime in human history. Malik's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, but when he opened it, he recognized the voice immediately. If you're reading this, then the protocol worked and justice is finally being served. I'm proud of you, son. I'm proud of the man you've become. The fight doesn't end here, it starts here. The world is going to need people like you to build something better from the ashes. Don't let them convince you that cynicism is wisdom or that power is more important than principle. Be better than I was. Be the man I should have been. All my love, Dad. The message was timestamped 15 years ago, programmed to be delivered only when the dead man's switch was activated. James Hartwell had known, even then, that his son would one day have to choose between comfort and justice. And somehow, across the years and beyond death, he had believed that choice would be made correctly. Malik looked around the command center at the organized chaos of justice finally being served. Harrison Weston was being led away in handcuffs, his empire reduced to rubble and his crimes exposed to the world. Priya was preparing to testify against some of the most powerful people on Earth. Trinity was coordinating with journalists across the globe to ensure the story couldn't be buried or forgotten. And his mother was staring at him with an expression of profound recognition, as if she was seeing him clearly for the first time. You look just like him, Ania said quietly. Not physically, you've always looked like me. But right now, in this moment, you have his expression. The look he used to get when he'd solved a particularly difficult problem. I'm not angry at you, Mama. You should be. I sold you to the people who killed your father. I convinced myself it was love, but it was really fear. Fear that you'd end up like him, brilliant, idealistic, and dead. Malik sat down beside her, noting how fragile she looked in the harsh fluorescent lighting. You were trying to protect me. I was trying to control you. There's a difference. Ania reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope, yellowed with age. This is the real video message your father left for you. The one I never let you see because I was afraid it would make you too much like him. Malik took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a USB drive, much older than the one that had started this entire journey. He recorded it the night before he died, Ania continued. He knew what was coming. He knew they would kill him for what he'd discovered. And he wanted to make sure you understood why it was worth dying for. As Malik held his father's final message, He realized that the greatest revelation wasn't about corporate corruption or government conspiracy or global networks of crime. It was simpler and more profound than that. Some truths are worth any price. Some fights are worth any sacrifice. And some legacies are more powerful than the men who leave them behind. The dawn sky was growing lighter now, painting the smoke-filled air in shades of gold and pink. Across the city, millions of people were waking up to a world where the powerful couldn't hide behind money and influence, where victims had voices that couldn't be silenced, where truth mattered more than comfort. It wasn't the end of corruption or injustice or corporate crime, but it was the end of silence. And sometimes, that was enough to change everything. 6 months later, the auditorium at Columbia University was packed beyond capacity, with students sitting in the aisles and standing along the walls. The lecture series on technology, ethics, and corporate responsibility had become the most popular course offering in the school's history. But today's speaker wasn't a professor or industry expert. Today's speaker was 18-year-old Malik Hartwell. They called him just the Helps Kid, Malik began, his voice carrying clearly through the microphone as he stood behind the podium where his father should have been 20 years earlier. For 15 years, that's all I was to the Westerns, invisible, insignificant, not worth noticing. But invisibility can be a superpower if you know how to use it. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. In the front row, Ania sat with tears of pride streaming down her face. Beside her, Priya, no longer hiding behind false identities, took notes on a tablet, documenting Malik's words for the book she was writing about corporate espionage and redemption. My father, Dr. James Hartwell, believed that truth was more powerful than money, that justice mattered more than profit, that doing what's right was worth any sacrifice. Malik paused, his eyes finding his mother's in the crowd. He died for those beliefs. But his death wasn't the end of his story, it was the beginning of ours. The past 6 months had transformed not just Malik's life, but the entire global conversation about corporate accountability. The Hartwell Protocols, as the media had dubbed his father's comprehensive evidence system, had led to the largest coordinated prosecution of corporate crime in history. Harrison Weston was serving life in prison without parole. Victoria Weston had fled to a non-extradition country with what remained of their assets. Damian Weston was in witness protection, having provided testimony that led to dozens of additional convictions. The temptation, Malik continued, is to see this as a victory story. David defeating Goliath, justice prevailing over power, the little guy finally winning. But that's not what this is about. He clicked to the next slide in his presentation, a photograph of Maria Santos, the housekeeper who had witnessed his father's murder. She had been found 6 months ago, living under an assumed name in Guatemala, too terrified to come forward until the Hartwell Protocols made it safe. This is Maria Santos. She could have testified 15 years ago and saved my father's life. She could have spoken up and prevented countless other victims. But she was afraid of losing her job, afraid of being deported, afraid of disappearing like so many other witnesses had disappeared. Malik's voice was gentle, free of judgment. Fear is the most powerful weapon in the arsenal of corruption. Not money, not threats, not violence, fear. In the audience, a student raised her hand. But how do we overcome that fear? How do we find the courage to speak up when the stakes are so high? Malik smiled, remembering another question asked in another place, by someone who had seemed like an ally but turned out to be an enemy who became a friend. We remember that we're not alone. We remember that truth has a way of finding other truth, that justice has a way of attracting justice. He clicked to another slide, a map of the world showing the global impact of the Hartwell Protocols. Red dots marked locations where corporate crimes had been exposed, blue dots showed environmental cleanup efforts, green dots indicated communities that had received reparations. The Hartwell Foundation has distributed over $2 billion in reparations to victims of corporate crime, Malik announced. We've funded environmental restoration projects in 12 countries. We've established educational programs in communities that were targeted for exploitation. We've created a global network of whistleblower protection that makes it safer for people to speak truth to power. The applause was thunderous, but Malik raised his hand for quiet. This wasn't about celebration, it was about education. But the most important thing we've learned is this: change doesn't happen because good people triumph over bad people. It happens because ordinary people choose to be extraordinary when the moment demands it. After the lecture, Malik stood in the university courtyard, surrounded by students asking questions and requesting selfies. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the promise of winter and the memory of spring. So much had changed since that night in the Western Mansion, but some things remained constant. His commitment to truth, his determination to honor his father's legacy, his understanding that power meant nothing without purpose. Malik! A familiar voice made him turn. Priya approached, no longer the polished corporate spy or the desperate fugitive, but someone who had found peace in serving something larger than herself. There's someone here who wants to meet you. Behind her stood a young woman, maybe 25, with dark hair and determined eyes that reminded Malik of someone. This is Dr. Sophia Cross, Priya said. She's developing new battery technology that could revolutionize renewable energy storage. Technology that builds on your father's work but takes it in directions he never imagined. Malik shook Sophia's hand, noting the calluses that spoke of hours spent in laboratories, the slight tremor that suggested someone working on the edge of a breakthrough. I've been following your story, Sophia said. What happened to your father? The theft, the cover-up, the murder. It made me realize that brilliant ideas aren't enough. We need brilliant ideas backed by unshakable integrity. And you think you have both? I think I have the ideas. I'm hoping you can help me with the integrity part. Sophia pulled out a tablet, showing him schematics that made his pulse quicken with recognition. This technology could end our dependence on fossil fuels within a decade. But I won't make the same mistakes your father made. I won't trust the wrong people or assume that good intentions are enough to protect groundbreaking discoveries. Malik studied the schematics, seeing his father's genius reflected and amplified in designs that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. What are you asking me to do? Help me change the world. But do it right this time. As the sun set over the university campus, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Malik realized that his father's legacy wasn't just about exposing corruption or achieving justice. It was about creating a world where the next generation of innovators could pursue their dreams without fear, where truth was protected by structures stronger than individual courage, where power served justice instead of the other way around. Dr. Cross, he said finally, I think my father would like what you're trying to do. Is that a yes? Malik looked around the courtyard, at the students discussing what they'd learned, at his mother talking with professors about establishing a scholarship program, at Priya documenting conversations that would become the foundation for new policies protecting whistleblowers and victims. This was what victory looked like, not the destruction of enemies, but the construction of something better from the ashes of what came before. That's a yes, he said. But we do this differently. No secret protocols, no hidden agendas, no choosing between transparency and safety. We build in the light, with partners we trust and protections we can rely on. Even if it takes longer, even if it's harder. Especially then, the best ideas are worth protecting, and the only way to protect them is to make sure they belong to everyone. As the campus settled into evening quiet, Malik pulled out his phone and opened the final message his father had left him. Not the one triggered by the dead man's switch, but the personal video his mother had finally given him. He'd watched it dozens of times over the past 6 months, but tonight felt like the right moment to watch it again. James Hartwell's face filled the small screen, looking older than Malik remembered, but with eyes that blazed with the passion that had driven him to greatness. Son, if you're watching this, then you know the truth about what happened to me and why. I hope you're angry. Anger is the fuel that powers justice. But I hope you're also hopeful, because hope is what transforms anger into action. The recording paused as his father seemed to look directly at him across the years. The world is going to try to convince you that cynicism is wisdom, that compromise is maturity, that accepting injustice is the price of security. Don't believe them. The world needs people who refuse to accept that some truths are too dangerous to tell, that some fights are too big to win, that some people are too powerful to challenge. The message continued, but Malik had memorized every word. The final lines were the ones that mattered most. Be better than I was, son. Be the man I should have been. And remember, you're never just the help. You're James Hartwell's legacy, and that legacy is going to change everything. Malik closed the phone and looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere in that vast universe, brilliant minds were working on problems that would define humanity's future. Somewhere, corporate executives were making decisions that would affect millions of lives. Somewhere, ordinary people were choosing between comfort and courage. And somewhere, in universities and laboratories and boardrooms around the world, the next generation of innovators was learning that integrity wasn't optional, that truth wasn't negotiable, and that some legacies were more powerful than the people who left them behind. The fight wasn't over. It would never be over. But for the first time in his life, Malik was certain that truth had more allies than enemies, that justice had more resources than corruption, and that the future belonged to people who chose to build rather than tear down. He wasn't just the helps kid anymore. He was his father's son. And that was everything. What did this story teach you about the power of truth over comfort, about choosing integrity even when it costs everything, about honoring the legacy of those who fought for justice before us? Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories that will change how you see the world.